making me go through a little more stages than we had to do last time. Last time I learned how to click a button.
Gotta love that technology. Thank goodness you know how to work with it a lot more.
All right, awesome. I believe we have it up. Perfect. All right, I'm gonna just share this with everyone.
And will we have access to the chat section if I ask questions or anything?
Yeah. So yeah, because the regular chat will you can just hit chat and people could do questions or raise hand. You raising your hand out, Lisa? You got a question?
I was just testing.
Oh.
She was there. She looked at her technology tools.
I was just testing.
All right.
She was there. She looked at her technology tools.
All right, everything is good. All right, perfect. Hello, everyone. We are doing our free grant writing workshop with Stacy Bellavia. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yes, you are.
I always want to say Bellavia because like when I ask Siri to call you, that's what he calls you, Stacy Bellavia. But it's Stacy Bellavia,
Yes,
$1 million grant writing specialist. And we're just gonna give some people some time to come on, jump on our live here. If you are wanting to do the Q&A session, we ask that you do press the link for the event, for the workshop event. There is a link on the actual event posting or any other ad or post for this workshop. There is the Zoom link so that you can ask questions because we'll only be doing Q&A with those within the Zoom. If we can read or see your question on the live feed, we might mention it, but it will be easier for us if you do it through via Zoom. All right. You'll do the face. All right. So my mom will be answering questions, well, asking the questions for you via Facebook Live. All right. So we'll give it 3 more minutes, and then we'll hand it right over to you, Miss Stacy, and you can take it away.
Great. Sounds wonderful. Thank you.
No problem. All right, Miss Stacy, you have the floor.
Great. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for this moment of time. And hopefully this workshop you'll find helpful and useful in your grant seeking endeavors. One of the things that always intrigues me is to know that First, we're here not only to help to support and educate, but also to be able to help instill some of these great practices in your writing and planning, and of course, being able to raise the money for your organizations. That's a huge piece. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to take just a few moments so I can kind of gauge the feel of our audience today. And by using the small, let me just make sure I can see this all right too. On the bottom, towards the bottom of your screen, on the right hand, you should see a reaction. And if you could, just so I can gauge if you have ever had experience writing the grants, if you could so kindly, give me a thumbs up if you've ever tried or you have written a grant. You can give me a thumbs up, that would be great. If not, that's perfect too.
I wrote many things, but not grants. Amen.
Well, one of the big things, and thank you so much, is we want to make sure that we're engaging our audience, because there is a lot of talk about grants and how they work. And the biggest misnomer is the difference between a grant and, of course, a loan. Grants can be a very, very beneficial feature to any organization when they're in need of money and to make their programs happen. So today what we're going to do is we're going to just scratch the surface of what grants are and the process, and hopefully I can leave you with a few tools and things to think about too. But at any time, if there's any questions, feel free to reach out, of course, in the chat box. And also at the end, I will provide my email and contact information as well. But of course, we have some just wonderful people participating today. And so thank you so much for letting me be a part. Okay, so if you wouldn't mind, may I go ahead and share the PowerPoint presentation? Can you see this okay?
Let me see. Let me see if it's asking me to allow you to share.
Oops.
Did you hit the share button?
Okay, hold on here, just one moment. Technical here. Let's see here. Okay, here we go. Where is our button here? Hold on just a second here. Okay.
I think it's at the bottom of the screen and it might be like green.
Okay, here we go. And it says host disabled participant share screen sharing. So if you can enable.
All right, let me.
I think it's in now.
Okay, yeah, because
I think we have it.
Where she controls it.
Yeah. Okay, can you see this on your screen? Let's see here.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Well, this, like I said, is a very brief introduction to grants. And of course, because of this being such a broad topic, of course, in future dates, we might be able to offer some other types of workshops and other things to help you as you're trying to start your grant writing endeavors. So welcome, everybody. My small little organization is called the Right Stuff Grant Consulting Group. And we actually came into existence from many years of writing lots of grants for things I needed in my classroom to a lot of things that people needed that I always found the pleasure in being able to find those funds in limited resources these days. So as we go along, just one moment here, I'm trying to. Today, what we're going to do, our learning, basically our three targets today is our introduction. We're going to identify what a grant is and what it's actually used for. Secondly, I treat grants like an invitation. So we're going to briefly go over the who, what, when, where, why, and how to write these grants. And then lastly, we are going to be able to supply a few planning tools for you as you're starting your research and your writing endeavors as well. So as we go along, if there's any questions, like I said, please feel free at any time to ask away. Here's just a little bit of information about myself. If you don't already know me, I know a couple people do already, but my name is Stacy Bellavia. I am the Chief Executive Officer for the Right Stuff Grant Consulting Group. I also am the Executive Director for Bella Vista Preparatory Academy. I'm a teacher at heart. I can't get away from that. I love it. I'm also a member of the Grants Professional Association. That is an organization of grant professionals throughout the world that actually utilize this platform to not only educate individuals and groups about writing grants, but we also stand as people's advocates and being able to do a lot of research in being able to find current grant funds and help people with their successful funding campaigns. This organization is something that is an honor to be a part of. We have in the state of Arizona, currently we only have 21 certified grant writers that actually have gone through the full certification process, which is just a huge, huge honor to be a part of this organization. I also have my master's degree in educational leadership as a school principal, my bachelor's degree in special education and general education studies, K-12. I've also graduated from the National Fire Academy, FEMA headquarters, and also served as a spokesperson for the Sun City Fire Department, State of Texas Department of Aging and Disability Services. And last but not least, I'm an Arizona native and I love my family. I love crafting, scuba diving, and some travel. So here's some pictures of my family and I. We do not have children, we have 4 kids. So here's a couple pictures of our endeavors here. But most importantly, the thing that I want to make sure to share, and at any time, if somebody needs me to slow down because there's a lot of information, please let me know. But first and foremost, what is a grant? That is something that's the $1 million question people have. And grants actually can be as simple or as complicated as you can make them. Grant, though, the way I look at it, is like an invitation for an investment, though. And so if you kind of put it into the aspect of somebody sending you an invitation, and it has the details of the who, what, when, where, why, and how, then you basically, you read that invitation and think, do I want to do I want to attend or do I not want to attend? And so basically by reading through this invitation, you're able to find out some really key details on what would be required if they were to actually fund your projects. So there's all different kinds of funding. Fundings are based on needs, projects, the scope, and overall your organization's missions. Mission is something that is your foundation to anything you have. So even if you're not part of a nonprofit organization, that is perfectly fine. You can have your own missions or professional goals or things like that. But the biggest thing that we have to take into mind is when we see grants, there's a complete distinctive difference between a grant and a loan. So of course, grants are funds that you do not have to pay back. Oftentimes, there are grantors or the people that fund your grant that will pay 100% of the grant. There are also other types of grants, such as matching, where an organization matches the grant with the funder. And there's oftentimes too other types of partnerships that can be involved with that as well. But the critical part of it is knowing what kind of grant you're applying for prior to all the legwork you're going to have to do, and to make sure that it's going to align with your mission. That is very, very important. Now, the grant is way different than a loan. The grants oftentimes will have certain specific requirements that is just created for that specific funding opportunity. So for example, back in the day, I used to write a lot of public safety fire department grants for vehicles and emergency equipment. And although we may have a federal funded grant here, we may have a foundational grant here providing funds, and they're going to be 2 separate different things in terms of the requirements for the actual reporting, who manages your grants, and the foundation may have other reporting requirements too. So it's really important that when you have your team start looking at grants, that you totally understand what type of grant it is, where it's coming from, and to make sure that it's not just a loan. Now, loans, of course, are those that you have, that's funds that you have to pay back. So of course, if you are specific to the grants, then you need to make sure that you have properly sought the right proposal for your endeavors. Now, the proposal itself is called an RFP, and we're going to get into that here in just a short moment. But before I go on, is there any questions about grants so far or anything that we've covered that anybody has a question for? Then I'll go ahead and continue on. Just let me know if there is. Okay, so the grant invitation. Of course, we all want invitations places, and I know that people do some amazing invitations. I actually received one from a fellow Kingdom of Women Enterprises colleague yesterday for a birthday announcement. Well, it's great when we look and say, oh, it's somebody's birthday. And there might be information like pictures, names, times, places, all those little tidbits of information. That's critical. The grant is simple as this. It's nothing more than an invitation for an investment. So keeping that in mind, you really have to understand these keywords though, because they are very small, but can be very big in deciding if you'll get the award or not. So how do you get one in the first place? Well, I wish there was a magic button I could press that could help you do that. However, of course, having people that are familiar with grant writing, that's always something that's of great benefit. But in today's day and age, we have some other great opportunities at our fingertips that may not have actually been available to the public. And a lot of that has to do with, of course, the beauty of the internet. There's many places that you can actually do grant searches now. There's lots of databases, and there's other really great resources that really are no to low cost type pieces of information or memberships that you can also have that will alert you of any grants that you might foresee in the future that you might need. So who do we ask? Where do we go? And how do we begin this? So the very first thing that I always tell people is to have a plan. So if you wouldn't mind, what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to show you something that I use when I'm going through our grants. And this is actually something I use for every single one of my grants. I've become very anal about keeping very consistent way that I look and track for grants. But if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to go ahead and, is it okay if I share another screen? Let's see here. Bear with me just one second here. Okay, I want to show you some information about our grants. This is an annual report on some key findings of grant seekers through this last year. With COVID-19 and 2020, just all of the different things that have happened, it's really important to know the state of the state of who's actually providing funds, what are they providing funding for, and what are the new requirements going to look like. So some of the things that I thought was really interesting, and I will actually provide this information at the end if you would like to read it on your own. But real quick here, this was a very interesting key finding. So in 2020, a lot of people thought since the economy and everything kind of stopped, that grants would stop as well. And although a lot of organizations had to put a pause on funding and some of the grants that may have been in the works at that time that closures occurred, we're finding that there's more and more money and funding still available out there. It just is a matter of getting creative and finding it. But over half the respondents told the people that actually were taking this survey, which is a combination of grant professionals throughout the United States that were surveyed, to find out about what are the greatest trends with especially pandemic times. What are we doing differently, and how is that going to impact future funding? So over half the respondents, it was pretty obvious at this point that they had to pivot from being in person to having to work from home, utilizing more technology. We also found out though that like us in grant writing, it was hard for us to foresee when we could actually submit grants on our clients' behalf. But if you look, over 3/4 of the respondents actually applied for Corona-specific grant funds. A lot of individuals were able to apply for things for emergency assistance, including anything COVID-19 related. Some people, especially a lot of our shelters and other places, were able to get emergency funds to be able to help supply for their organizations and emergency help that families were in need of. But one of the things was interesting is that a lot of people really utilized the Small Business Administration through PPP loans and also through the EDIL grants that they were also offering at one point. Now, SBA is an organization that is phenomenal. I love working with them, but they do have various grants and loans that are available. A lot of people sometimes assume that if you go and you apply for something that it's a grant. Please make sure that you understand that there are some things that are considered loans. So you want to make sure you're doing your homework. Also, the median dollar amount for Corona's relief type funding for large organizations was approximately about $78,000 for people. But one of the things that we found, though, is that people that are putting together the grants, they kept going, they kept being persistent. And one of the things that we're finding now is some other key facts that is very interesting. Right now, currently, based on some of the research that I've done through the Grant Professionals Association, is that the largest types of awards that we were finding this last year was in program and project supports, education and emergency funds. But some of the lower funded areas included infrastructure support or buildings. Buildings are very hard at times to acquire, and so there's a whole process for that, and you may have to make sure you're going through the right organization in order to acquire that. I'll explain that here shortly. But the biggest thing that we were finding is, where's the money then? How do we go about seeking this information? So anyhow, 50% of the respondents of this grant funding was basically their annual budgets were being compromised at that point. And so a lot of people, when they saw those needs, they're, okay, we need to get this funded quicker. And believe it or not, the process has actually become a little bit more streamlined for people like us that are writing these grants. Anyhow, I want to show you, just one moment here, let's get back on here, where we are going from here. So of course, we have to put on our, we have to have our equipment ready to go when we're preparing for this journey. Because of course you want to be able to make sure have the treasure at the end, because if you want this, you have to do it right. And so hopefully these tools will help you today, but it's very important to just keep in the mindset, a grant may sound scary, but let's call it an adventure at this point. So you're going to be going on a journey. Okay, your number one thing is your relationships. When you are not only getting yourself out there and wanting to find out what an organization's needs are or your needs are, it's important to make sure you have a team of people that you can go to discuss these things with. So those relationships are very important. Also, with those relationships, it is a key pinnacle piece of, especially with private foundations, that they know who you are and what you are doing. And this is very important because as grants come in to those specific organizations, they may be able to put a face and a name together with that grant. Or you may have had great opportunities in the public to do some wonderful things like community service or other things. And if the foundation is aware of that through the relationships you build, they may have a higher chance of funding you because you've gone that extra mile to let them build a relationship with you as well. That is a key thing. Also, your relationships should not just be with the potential funder. There's so many other parts, and this is why Kingdom of Women Enterprises is so close to my heart, is because you have the opportunity to build that unity within your community, with women, with entrepreneurs, with just some of the most incredible people. And those incredible people oftentimes have those incredible minds too. And so instead of looking at a grant as like a competition per se, I have foundations and people I work with that I'm blessed to be a part of that may be trying to apply for similar different funding sources. And of course, for me, I'm the grant writer, but I also, when I take on a project, it's because it's something of my heart too, something that's important. And those relationships are going to be very important as you go through that process. Now, when we get to that process with relationships, get people that, of course, are also going to be very patient and will not be ones that will just leave you. You want to be right there with these people along the whole journey. It's important, though, when I get down to it, the planning part, the relationships are huge, but you must plan, and keep planning and planning and planning. And I know it sounds like it's overkill, but just for example, I will show you. I keep, and I know this probably isn't the most efficient, but it works for me. I'm still a little vintage, so everything is either in my big planner, my little planner, or on my electronic planner. But I have to keep my notes. Everything I do, I write down so I can keep it in one place. But when we're talking about a plan, for example, this one right here is a full executive plan that's taken about 3 months to put together for an organization. But I have everything from the financials at my fingertips. I have the organization's missions, their values, what they've done. So at any time, if somebody were to ask a question, or if we could submit different samples of work, then we can go ahead and do so and have access to it. But what I always do is I keep it electronically and a paper copy of it so I can always keep it with me in case I need it. The planning part of it too, budgets. I know we talk about money, and sometimes money is one of those subjects that people just don't enjoy talking about, but it's very important that you plan, meaning in your budgets for different things ahead of time for your grants, and just being forward thinking. As you're starting to plan, you should probably have line items there built in for maybe grant writing support and other people that you might potentially need to contract with in order to show that you are having somebody help from the outside with your funds. Additionally, it is key that anything an organization does, that you of course align it with your policies of your organization, that you're abiding by the board of directors, well, your organization's policy, but then also that you're abiding by whatever policy it is that's required by these specific grants. There's also a couple other things. The beauty of pre-planning and planning some more is that we can move quicker on when grants open, and that's really huge. So when we're talking about the plans, we also need to know who's going to be with us, how are they going to help us, where, when, all the invitation items that we would have is going to fit into that planning piece too. So what I would highly suggest, even if you don't have, like me, I'm a woman show. So of course I have to wear many hats, but if you have a cadre or a group of people that can help you with this, it will help save so much time. Plus, when your eyes get really tired, it's nice to have somebody there that can help support you too, and maybe proof and do other things. It is critical that you keep your short range plan, a long range calendar, and the next things that I'm going to discuss. Now, I believe one of the organizations here right now already has this information, but for those that may not have this already, there are some tools that will really be helpful. First of all, by having your DUNS number and your SAMS number. So if you're a 501c3, or let's say you are for, if you are for business, for profit or nonprofit, it's important to have your identification numbers in place. So in the grant world, a lot of foundations or nonprofits will go through and they will have these two numbers that I'm mentioning here, DUNS and SAMs. Now, the DUNS number and SAM's number, I'm going to go over here just shortly, but we also will need you to start preparing, pulling financials. You're going to want to show those financials. Your board of directors, make sure if you need to update anything on your board of directors membership, if you need to look at your board of directors, your policies and procedures, this is a great time to do that. Plus, it allows you to not only know that your information is current with what your organization is, but it helps ensure your alignment to the grant proposal itself. It's critical that that stuff is updated before you start the process. And then, of course, any policy or anything that is needed to be revised, this is a great time in the planning before we actually even begin. So this is what I use. I'm a teacher. I have to use graphics, and please, at any time if I'm talking too much, please let me know, because I always like to use tools and other things. But colored Post-it notes are my friend. I color code everything. So what I start doing is, I'm such a visual person that I will take a different color for each thing that I'm looking at. This is called the logic model that you see on the screen. Can everybody see that? Are we good? Okay, so this is basically you specifying and being very specific to what project you're planning. So you're gonna have your inputs, so what the actual program is. You're gonna have your outputs and outcomes. So I have 3 different colors for this. So as I'm brainstorming or working with somebody, we'll take down this information and I'll just Post-it note it up on my wall or wherever I can. And I write, well, what is our goal? What do we want to do? Let's say it's providing technology for at-risk populations in homelessness, or maybe it's many different things. But what you have to do is you start brainstorming what it is and just write it all down. Then what you do is a process of elimination. As you're posting and you're writing your stuff down, you're going to post it onto your board and you're going to look at that. And then you're going to say, truly, is this what we want to do? And can we break it down in enough words that it's going to be able to cover the other parts of this project? So then once I have these, I move to my next color. So let's say, for example, green. Then for my outputs, well, what are we going to do with this? So what it is and what are we going to do? Those are things that are important. So we have our inputs, what the program is, the outputs of what activities are you going to offer? Who's going to be a part of this? Are we looking at hiring staff? Are we going to have volunteers help us? Are we going to have interns? However that is, you want to be able to have inputs, your activities, and who's going to be making that happen. So some of the who, what, when, where, whys, and hows. Now, you should always have short, medium, and long range goals for this whole process. It's important by looking at these visually, like using these different colors, just posting them up on a wall or wherever you want to. But by seeing these visuals, it will help you determine what your outcomes might look like. Now, ultimately, let's say somebody comes to me and says, Stacy, I need a building for a program. That's a very, 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 a lot of people ask me that. But I need to know things like, what is your overall outcome going to be? Why do you want this? There's going to be a lot of questions, and this will help break things down. I've also provided this, bear with me, sorry. I've also provided this in a link at the end, and if you need another copy of it, I can gladly provide that as well. But we also have to think about the other factors that go in our grant. It's great if you're given the money, and it's wonderful if you've got some of your activities, but the other part about the outcome that's very, very important is your evaluation tool, how you're going to effectively evaluate your process. I can only scratch the surface of this today, but basically what I'm saying is that if you're applying for a grant, it's critical that if you are putting together your proposal, that you have a way to show how you're going to evaluate the information and the data you're collecting or the service that you're providing, because you have to be able to evaluate how effective that is. Now, through that process and evaluating, that's a whole nother topic, but it's important to be able to say and be able to show what it is that you asked for. That not only gives you the accountability for the funder in what it is that you were providing by being provided the money. So you're saying you're basically doing what you said you were going to do. But then also that could potentially run into another opportunity in the future for future funding. So it's building your credit and accountability and those relationships as you are seeking these funds. Now, if I were to go into a local foundation that I work with on a regular basis, they know who I am, and they know what I do in terms of trying to help people and support the foundation's missions by helping others seek funds. It's important to build those relationships because then they know that the job's going to be done and it will be done right the first time. That's critical. But as we go in, back to the DUNS number. The DUNS number basically is this. As we're planning, it's the federal identification number. And basically it tracks how federal funding is being spent. Now, a lot of private foundations may not ask you for DUNS numbers or SAMS numbers, but it's very wise to go ahead and get those numbers. They're free of charge, and there is a process. And so I've included the link here for you to actually apply. Once you have that, I also suggest acquiring this, which is your SAMS number. That is your System for Award Management registration. Basically, this is your second level of credit that is showing that to the potential funder that you have not only established yourself the proper way through not only being able to acquire these for federal levels, but it also is something that's important because this must be renewed annually. A lot of people think once they have their DUNS number and SAMS number, they're set. But it's very wise at this time to look, if you already have your SAMS number, to make sure that it's up to date. It's only valid for 1 year at a time. And sometimes it will take a little bit of time to process. So there's a link that's here in my PowerPoint, and I've also included that at the end of my presentation as well, where you can go and submit your registration. Now, how do I find the grants? That's the million-dollar question. Relationship building is the key. Of course, there's people like me that are grant writing professionals, and we typically have access to thousands of different grant opportunities in various databases. So it's always helpful to kind of not only get to know who, especially like with Kingdom of Women, there's so many different people and so many organizations that are being represented, but the relationship is really, really key. Now, there are all different types of different funds. Where can you find them? Some of your best places is start locally. A lot of people would love to jump into $1 million, $2 million grant project with the federal government, but they may not have ever had the experience of writing some of these grants. Grants can be very extensive. And so I always suggest that we start small and grow. So a lot of these different things, such as your local city, county, and state, they may have various grants. So if you actually go to the city of Phoenix, city of Glendale, Peoria, wherever you live, or have where your project's going to be, and just look for any grant availability. That is a key thing. For example, I have a wonderful client that actually this week, first grant, a city grant that we had all applied for, and they ultimately want to have a building. But we knew how important it was that they established a relationship with this particular city. So we applied also for a smaller grant and was just awarded 2 days ago for $10,000, just to help with supplies and some things for some of our needy families here in our community. But when you start with a smaller proposal, what that does is it helps establish that relationship with that group, or it helps you establish not only that relationship, but it shows your system of accountability. So let's say after that organization has gone through their grant process, which they already have, but they're now just in the waiting right now in the wings for being given the funding. So basically what will happen, they receive the money and then there's terms with that. Oftentimes grants are about a year long, but there are some that are long range where there could be 3-year grant or a 5-year grant. It really is important that you look at those things as you're going into it to find out what your funding is. But I can almost guarantee that this person that started small, we got that city grant for them, and now they can go to the next level of asking, we need this, we need that. And the likelihood of them getting funded is pretty high because they are more aware of that organization. Do I have any questions so far? We good? Okay, great. And again, if you have any questions, I know there's a lot of information, and typically I have people engaging in in-person activities, so bear with me here. This is the best part about grants. Oh my goodness, I found a grant. Now what do I do? It's $1 million question too. Well, each grant's going to have specific guidelines. Please, 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 when you are looking at your grants, you're gonna find a title, the very first thing probably, of what it is, who it is, why it's there. Please make sure you read it 3, 4, 5 times before you start thinking that this is the grant for you. The reason being is that you will receive a thing called an RFP. It's called Request for Proposals. And in that, you're gonna have to make sure that you fit the guidelines for what the grant is going to be funded for. A lot of grants are available for nonprofits and education. There's so many different things, but you have to make sure you align with what it is they're going to ask for. For example, if they say that this particular grant, if the funder is saying this is COVID specific, but you want to have a bicycle program, it may not necessarily be COVID specific. So either you're going to have to be very creative in the writing on making it specific to COVID, or the likelihood of these two things may not mix and blend well with the grant, and it could potentially then be discarded. You don't want to ever have that feeling of going through the whole process and knowing that your efforts weren't aligned to what it was they were asking for in the beginning. That's why it's better to take the time up front, plan, make sure you have everything in your organization together and up to date, and then read that request for proposals. Then I will tell you one of the other things that we have found, and by sitting on a federal review board and also on other grant applications and screening them, I will tell you a couple things that are very important. In the request, when they specify that your formats, fonts, or words must be limited to a certain type, you will need to do that. Sometimes they use that, believe it or not, as a screening tool. Could you follow the directions? And believe it or not, you can have one of the most beautifully written grants, an amazing project. But if you could not follow the directions, you're probably going to be unfortunate with the word of it being discarded. So even down to those details of the format you're using, the font, if they say they want double spaced, you're gonna have to make sure everything is done to their expectation. Also, never, never, never be late. The awards, and now with technology, things can be date and time stamped pretty quickly. If you are planning to write any sort of grant, you must give yourself enough time. That is why my old school calendars really come in place. I have to open these up. I even have a calendar, you can't really see it on my big wall here, but I have an annual calendar of when I have to start things. If we need to do annual board training, we do that months in advance before grants. All these other things need to be in place. But the other thing is with your grants, if they are requiring you to put in a letter of request, or if they say that your deadline is 3 p.m. on Friday, the 13th, you must make sure it is in by that time. However, as great as technology is, and how wonderful it is to be able to have the accessibility and ability to send something within a second's time, it's also can also be something that's very detrimental with technology. For some reason, you have issues that come into place with your technology going down, or somebody doesn't receive something in time, or whatever the case may be, that could hinder your ability to be successful in your grant. So it is my highest suggestion that if you are given a deadline of when your grant needs to be proposed and submitted, I would highly suggest making that deadline at least 2 weeks in advance to ensure that the adequate people are able to review and respond if needed. I know that some organizations have to have a full board of directors review on the proposals prior to them being submitted. Please give yourself at least a 2-week window. And once you've gotten your I's dotted, T's crossed, however that is you want to set that up, then I highly suggest submitting early or whatever it is that you need to for that specific grant. And then follow up. Very important. You need to make sure that you are following up with whoever it is that's involved with the process and planning, but also follow up with the organization and let them know, thank you so much for this opportunity. I look forward to working with you in the future. We've successfully submitted our grant. Please let us know if there's more information you need. Letting them know that you're on top of things is also going to show that level of accountability too. Now, me, on the other hand, I will be very honest. What I do is when I press the button for a go and send a grant, I will probably sit there for a few minutes and not only smile, like, whew, I got this done, I made it. But then I have to also realize that it's kind of a waiting game too. So I know how difficult that can be because you want to have word. But on average, you will find that most grants will take about a month to 2 months before you even receive word on any type of process. Some larger grants might take 3 to 6 months in order to find out if you've been awarded those or not. However, some beautiful ones, especially some of your smaller and your more local foundation grants, you might actually receive word a lot quicker. But please understand from your budget perspective that you want to plan, and especially for a grant, at least I would give yourself 3 to 6 months time before you may ever see that fund actually be there for your project. But please make sure you follow the guidelines. Now, what do? So the waiting process, I know, can be very difficult, but always be prepared by having all these things together, like our notebooks and our strategies and our files at a moment's notice. I can submit certain things. It's very, very important because these people will not wait for you. If they've asked you for something, you want to be very timely in responding and getting that stuff over to them the way it needs to be. Now, there are going to be some things that are very critical when it comes to your larger, especially your larger grants. I know by my experiences is that, especially for the governmental grants, be prepared to provide any legal documentation you need to, such as, let's say it's LLC or nonprofit, any of that information is important, but then also be prepared for financials. So, last audit information, any of your bank statements, all those other things that are going to have to go with them, they're going to probably want to look at. And because they, of course, want to make sure that if they are going to provide funds, that of course the person that's receiving the funds are also going to do due diligence in their planning as well. I just finished a grant that was very surprisingly, it was a very lengthy process for a city grant that they asked. They wanted to know not only who are the board of directors, but who are the decision makers on that board of directors? How is the process of receipting and money handling taking place? And they also want to know that whole process. They wanted a whole breakdown. If this person receives the money, do you have somebody in place to properly document that? Do you have somebody in place to make those deposits? Do you have somebody in place that's going to record it? And do you have a system? They also asked who signs checks. They asked other questions that I had never seen on some of the grants before, but I have a feeling in today's day, people will want to know your whole setup on what you're going to do before they'll even consider you. So please just make sure you understand that they might be asking you a bunch of information, but all basically they want to make sure is happening is that if they give you the funds, that there's a system already in place, so you're not having to recreate the wheel when you're getting into the money that they'll give you. Also, if you do not know something, ask. It's better to ask and get the specific details than assuming anything. So that's why it's so helpful to have that extra colleague or family member or your board of directors to re-review everything. Keep them in the loop of communication. But then they can be your sounding board if you have questions. But specific grant questions, don't feel like you're over asking information. If you have to ask the organization for something, be honest. It's better that you have a very good, transparent relationship and they understand that you want to do it right, that they'll see that. And it's very highly regarded that people look at that. And it's very important to see that this person's going to be responsible with the money that they may provide you. Now, this is your chance also to not only show them that you're accountable for your money, but this could also help you with future requests. So it's basically something that is just a critical thing. Do not assume a thing. Now, let's say you're awarded. Okay, so when I got the phone call the other day, I was like, oh yes, my friend's gonna be so excited. I get to make a good phone call, this is gonna be great. Okay, now you might think, oh, $10,000, show me my money, where is it? And then they say, oh, well, you have to wait until the next fiscal year in order to receive it. Well, when's the next fiscal year? So it's important to know when that is, but different forms of grants may have different funding times. Sometimes money is given to you in one allotment. Sometimes it might be annually. It could be one that continues on for multiple years. But all that information should be outlined in the requirements that the funders are going to be providing to you in the request or even in any type of additional communication they make with you. They'll be very specific, I'm sure. Now, keep your accounting practices and your audits happening the way you say you're going to do it in your proposal. Very, very important, especially because if you're looking for large-scale grants, they're going to want to see this. Make sure you keep all your documentation and evaluation materials. And I highly recommend, especially for new organizations, to please keep a whole historical database of everything that you're doing. Keep your numbers. If you have somebody that may not be savvy, like I'm not very savvy with spreadsheets at all. So if I don't know how to do it, I'm probably going to ask somebody to help me, but I would create spreadsheets of what you're asking for. Keep a spreadsheet of your grants. Keep a spreadsheet of your activities. Keep a spreadsheet of how many people you're impacting. And the reason being is especially for Kingdom of Women, you encounter so many women and different businesses, I'm sure, all the time, and you do some wonderful work. Well, wouldn't it be great to be able to have a whole archive of everything you've done and all the lives you've taught or touched and be able to pull that just in a matter of seconds? That and those stories and how many people you impact through the year, you might think you just maybe helped one person out last month or two, but if let's say you've been in existence for 20 years, that's a lot of people that you may have made a huge significant impact on. Also, be prepared to report at any time. They're going to give you requirements, but it's always good practice just to make sure that you're doing what it is you need to do. So that's why the power of planning is so critical on this. Then you, of course, communicate the news. You know, the best thing is to not only be able to take a second and let the people know how much you appreciate all the help throughout that process, but it's also good to make sure that you are celebrating too, saying, hey, we did this, is our new little step. Okay, now, the evaluation piece, this, again, this is a really broad topic, but please make sure you're evaluating the way you say you're going to do it. This is our measurement to see how effective the grant worked. And if there's areas that you need to improve, this is your opportunity to either continue on the grant and report that, and then maybe ask for additional funds later to be able to continue it based on your evaluation data. That is very important. Now, you'll also be closing out your grant too. So once you receive the money and once the programs are up and going or whatever it is that you, at the end of your period's done, then you need to close it out properly. So of course, planning and being able to go back to what the requirements are going to be is very important. Sometimes it's just a matter of a thank you and here's our report on our data that we collected. Or they might want an extensive executive overview of your program. So that's why it's really important that you understand from day one when you when you're reading through the actual invitation for the grant, that's where you also have to see what you're going to have to do to close it out too at the same time. Now, I wasn't chosen. What do I do? Don't go off and cry in a corner, please, 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 please. I know how frustrating it is, but the biggest thing is think about this is your next opportunity to write another grant and to keep trying. Persistence pays. It really, truly does. And it could be just a matter of finding the right match to where you're at with the organization, or it might be that project that they really want to be able to help you with. But this is a great time to reevaluate your process and what's working, what might need to be tweaked. But then also it's a skill that takes refinement. I've been doing this for 20 plus years. And there's been times where I get really frustrated, like I just submitted a $7.5 million grant and we were really hoping for it. But this also, believe it or not, one of those grants that I was like, oh, I feel really horrible. What did I do? Well, I can evaluate. Was it something that was worded differently or whatever? However, a lot of those organizations will provide feedback and please ask for it. Maybe they're looking for something just a little bit different, or maybe there's something else that needs to be provided, but at least this gives you a chance to reevaluate. Okay, well then I'm gonna make it better for next time. And believe it or not, that next year when I applied for that grant, thankfully, we were awarded it. So it was very helpful because we created also that relationship and just asking, well, what can we do better next time? Or what can we, make ourselves stand out to be the recipients next time? And it oftentimes will work. Now, I can't guarantee that, of course, because of course, that's just a whole different process in itself. But this is your opportunity and just keep writing. It's so important. Now, of course, I've rambled on and on and on, and you're probably, oh my gosh, there's a lot of information. Scratch the surface. But at this time, do you have any questions?
I do. Now, how would, because a lot of times, especially with like finding like sponsors and stuff like that, they want yours to stand out and be unique. So how would you say would be the best way to go about making yours stand out and be unique?
Okay, that of course comes in very clever planning and marketing strategies, of course. But what makes people unique is by really being able to provide something that maybe not everyone is doing the same way. That's why if you collaborate with a group of people as you're doing this, grants can be opportunity also to become a community, if you will, when it comes to being able to say, okay, well, if we want a building for this outreach program, what are we going to offer that the YMCA may be offering down the street? You want to see where you can be unique. And that's where you're planning. Go see what other programs are out there. What are people doing? Because the more legwork you're going to do, the more unique your experiences can be later, because you can glean it all in and then say, well, how can I stand out in that crowd? And so that's where you're building the relationships, you're visible and getting out into the community, find out what these programs are all about, and then try to find a twist or something that you can do a little bit differently. And that's where a whole team can look at that and say, well, this is what we can do. And then make sure that that is something that you emphasize in your grants, that we're going to be able to offer this, which other organizations are not at this point. So you want them to understand that they're going to get a great program, but it is going to be something that's maybe new and innovative too. Did that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there any other questions? Now.
Oh, yeah, there was one more question.
Mhm.
Well, all right. Is it possible to get a state and federal grant at the same time?
It is. You can actually, and of course, this is all dependent upon what you're asking for. But let's say you're in the process of writing a state grant for something. That will be specific to whatever grant you're writing for that. But let's say you are also looking at a federal grant. Well, if your federal grant is the same as the state, I would, and of course, because I'm not the person that would make those decisions, but I would make sure that you read through all the program descriptors to see if you can have concurrent grant proposals. Oftentimes what people will do is they'll apply for, let's say, a state grant for a certain level of service, and federal typically for a larger level of service. And so they might have one unique proposal here, and they may have a completely different proposal here. You can have multiple proposals out there at one time, but of course you do want to make sure that if it says that you cannot have concurrent proposals, then you need to make sure that you've read through the description. And that should be in your very first read through of the program and the RFP, which is your request for request for proposals. Hopefully that answers, but you can have small grants out there for certain things, but I typically will have a small one and then large one to back that up with maybe the buildings or whatever the case may be. So it is something that is a choice that, of course, either you're making or your organization's making to proceed. But one of the things that's nice is that if you develop a good overview and have your updated information, oftentimes you can glean a lot of the information and put it into the same format, and the information you can share it, basically cut and paste some of the information into other proposals. Proposals would get much easier as you go because you'll have a whole file of not only your resources and updated information, but you have a better idea of what you're going to need to say and how to say it. So it's just going through that whole process as well. Did that answer your question?
Yes, they said that answered their question.
Great. And remember, grants are not overnight. If you want a good quality grant, it's going to take time. You need to have your foundation. You need to have those solid roots in place before you start growing. And so making sure your information is updated, making sure you're communicating, but then when you go through that process, you understand that it could be one of those things where it could be multi-months that you'll know if you're going to be rewarded or not. And the one thing that I always do is I try to be a possibility thinker. I'm going to get this. The mindset of this is going to happen. This is going to happen. Of course, you keep that mindset always. But if for some reason it doesn't happen with one grant, at least you have an idea of what you're going to do. and it'll just increase your ability to be able to seek that in the future. And so you don't ever want to feel like you've been denied, but there's not always a guarantee that you're going to receive a grant or not. So that's why it's very important that you're following the directions and making sure you've got a proper plan in place. Is there any other questions? Well, here's some of the resources that I shared earlier in our presentation, but then there's also some other things. One of the search engines that is very popular is grants.gov for federal level grants. I've included a link here where you can go to the website, and also I've included a link for learning. Let me go back there. I'm sorry. My apologies. Oops. Sorry, guys. Just 1 second here. Let me get back here. Okay, so grants.gov, it's a pretty great little search engine where you can get information on some of the federal grants. Again, looking at your state level grants, your community grants, lots of foundations that are out there that provide private funding. But then there's some other resources. The grants.gov also has some learning tools and some other things available as well. And of course, I'm more than happy to try to give you whatever resources that I have as well. But most importantly, I use my logic model that I shared earlier in the presentation. Okay, so if there's anything else that I can do, please let me know. It's been a pleasure being able to present today. I hope this information gives you a little snapshot in the wonderful world of grants. It can be a lot of fun and it could be a great adventure. And of course, sometimes, especially in these days and age, it doesn't hurt to ask, because sometimes you might find that you'll find those hidden gems and treasures to be able to fund the projects that you're trying to seek. If there's any questions or anything after our presentation, I've included my email, there's the website, and then my phone number. But at any time, if there's any other information that you guys feel helpful or that you would ever want for a future workshop, just let me know. I'd be more than happy to help you. Thank you, and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Miss Stacy, again.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Well, thank you. And if there is anything else that anybody else has, we will be in the office all afternoon. So thank you very much.
All right. So just stay on, Miss Stacy. I'm just ending this live, but we have a question for you afterwards.